All right, we're seeing the participant count jump up here as we get ready to go. Thanks for joining us today. This is the research review, the Campus ESP research review, increase family engagement to increase retention, increase student retention. So we're going to give it a couple seconds here to let people join. Hopefully they digested their lunch, got some coffee. Subir, Jen, and I were just talking about how all the snow on the East Coast has already melted, at least in our region, in Philadelphia. And Pittsburgh didn't get anything, right, Jen? No
Yeah,
snow.
yeah, no snow in Pittsburgh. At least downtown. It's sunshiny and clear.
All right. Well, we're getting that in like probably 3 hours. So actually it'll be dark by then, so we won't get any of the sunshine or clear. So that's Philadelphia for you. Okay. Looks
Oh,
like we
sorry.
got a good number of participants on here. We're ready to get started. We've already done the polite banter back and forth. So let's get going here. Welcome, everybody. Again, this is the Campus ESP Research Review. Increase family engagement to increase retention. I'm going to introduce my guests here in a moment. But first, you know the drill. Lines are on mute. So if you're screaming, I won't be able to hear the screams. Feel free to ask any questions in chat. We will be getting to those questions in chat this time. And we'll send the recording along with the slide deck and a copy of the new report to everyone, excuse me, that is registered. So feel free to sit back and hopefully think of a couple good questions to ask Jen, Subir, and myself. So let's jump into some of the intros. First, I'd like to introduce Jen Smith. She's the Assistant Director for Parent Relations at Duquesne University. So welcome, Jen. Happy to have you on the program here. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, like Dave said, my name is Jen Smith. I'm the Assistant Director for Parent Relations at Duquesne University. I've worked at Duquesne for about 6 years, in this current position for about 3. And I also manage the Duquesne Parents and Families portal. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get a little bit more into Duquesne here in a moment. We also have Subir Sahu, who is joining us from Drexel. Subir, thanks for joining us again. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Dave, Jen, it's a pleasure to be here with both of you and great to be with everyone else here today. So as Dave said, my name is Subir Sahu. I have the privilege of serving as the Senior Vice President for Student Success here at Drexel. So in that role, I get to work with a lot of different areas, all obviously touching upon the student experience. So student life, our athletics department, our career development center, business services, student counseling and health, and a variety of other areas, mostly on the administrative side. Hard to believe I'm approaching my 18th year here at Drexel.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, pretty crazy. It's 18th year here and, more than 2 decades in higher ed. So seen a lot of changes, some of which we'll talk about today as it relates to family engagement and working with our family and parents as a part of the student success organization here at Drexel too. So really excited to dialogue about all of those topics here today.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Subir. And my name is Dave Becker. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Campus ESP. All 3 of us are actually based in Pennsylvania. So hopefully you like the state of Pennsylvania because you got 3 people from Pennsylvania here. I've been working on Campus ESP for a little over 7 years, and I will tell you the student success and student retention portion of what we're about to cover today is really where we started at Campus ESP from a parent engagement perspective. So I'm really excited to review some of the newest research that we have on parent engagement influencing student success, and of course review it with Jen and Subir. So let's jump into a couple more slides here just to set the stage. I thought it might be interesting to just look at who registered for this webinar. 1/3 is really people who have a title from enrollment and admissions. I'm not sure why the admissions piece got cut off there, but 1/3 are from kind of the enrollment area. 1/3 are from parent programs, folks like Jen. We had about 14% register from student success, 13% with orientation in their title. We had 4% who were researchers, and there's a final green sliver right there, which is registrars. And it's going to be kind of interesting because some of the results that we have are the result of FERPA protected information going to parents and families. And a lot of times, of course, registrars play a role in that whole FERPA process. So that'll be part of the discussion that we'll get to. We can talk freely since there's very few registrars on here about what we really think about FERPA. So that'll be interesting. If you've never heard of Campus ESP, we're at close to 400 colleges, universities, and we've supported over 9 million families. And a little bit of a commercial here before we jump into it. We are a complete parent engagement strategy, which means that we have an all-in-one parent communication platform. If you're looking to roll something out to your parents, but even more importantly, there are experts here to help with your success. Generally, our implementations are about 3 weeks. You have a dedicated account manager, and we help out with the content. And then we also focus on the analytics to make sure that it's working. There's an annual renewal process. So we really want to make sure that you're getting a strong ROI out of Campus ESP. And if you want to learn more about Campus ESP, you've already been to our website to register, so I won't tell you where the website is, although it's pretty obvious. But I will recommend that if you do want to get more research and reports and information, whether you're using Campus ESP or not, but just focus on parent engagement and family support. The blogs and research page is really useful and has a lot of different customer success stories too that you can kind of use to model your strategy. Okay, so let's go into a little bit more real quick about Duquesne, and I want to kind of set the stage here that so Jen, based out of Pittsburgh, 4-year private, mid-size, about 8,100 students. You've been using Campus ESP since 2021. And when we look at how you're using Campus ESP, you have about 2,000 parents receiving academic and financial data alerts from Campus ESP. This is FERPA protected information that parents have to request from their students. Students have to approve. And then once they get that, you can see that parents clicked on that student data about 56,000 times last year. So where you're making the data from the student record available to parents through a FERPA waiver process. And we're going to talk about how that can help with student retention. Let me just ask you, and then we'll go to Sabir, what drove the focus on parents? Because any kind of investment is kind of sometimes a struggle to get through at a school. So what drove the focus on parents for Duquesne?
So at Duquesne, prior to the pandemic, Duquesne did see the need for a parent platform. Once the pandemic hit, Duquesne really accelerated that process. It didn't have a streamlined way to communicate with parents, and we saw the need more than ever during the pandemic. The parent influence is important. It's part of the student experience. So we utilized, Campus ESP. Fun fact that I was going to bring up in a little bit, but the choice to use Campus ESP was one of the quickest implementations that Duquesne has ever gone through. It took roughly like 4 weeks to implement, so pretty quick process, but the parent portal gave us a way to communicate with parents during the pandemic, information on procedures and different ways Duquesne was handling the pandemic and keeping, everybody safe.
So that it feels like the pandemic, COVID, was kind of a catalyst for getting information out about health safety, but also just recognizing students were home with their parents. And we saw that with most schools too, which is, I think things changed after COVID in so many ways, but one of them was definitely more schools using parent and family engagement. So that's helpful to understand that background. And also, Sabir, wanted to bring you in here. Drexel, as many people know, based in Philadelphia, kind of a larger private, I think sometimes surprises people, 22,000 students. You have about 7,000 parents using or receiving academic and financial data alerts from Campus ESP. Not quite the same velocity as Duquesne, which I thought was interesting, but you had parents click on student data 140,000 times last year. So for you, what made parents a focus for Drexel? What was the reasoning that kind of got things turned over there?
Yeah, it's a great question, Dave, and I actually love to share kind of the story or the narrative of how we landed in partnership with the Campus ESP team. So prior to my senior vice president role, I sat in the vice president and dean of students role for several years at Drexel, and that was really the first time that family engagement became a part of my work on the formal level here at the institution. And we had what a lot of institutions of higher ed had, which was a Facebook page. And that was our primary method of communication with parents. And we weren't nimble enough in terms of communicating in a timely and thoughtful manner with our family members. And it created a combative kind of atmosphere for us at the institution with family members, which just, wasn't serving our purpose and really wasn't helping anybody. Well, it certainly wasn't helping the family members who were eager for more information and more of a two-way street as it relates to communicating with them. And certainly wasn't helpful for us in terms of what was the type of atmosphere we were trying to build. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself in terms of what we're going to talk about over the next few slides, but it also became very apparent to me that times were changing in higher education, and family members were true partners in their students' journey. And we needed to align with the times. And so I think that really helped to drive us towards our partnership with Campus ESP. How do we shift the narrative so that our partnership with parents is just that, a partnership with parents and families, and not something that's seen in a combative tone? And how do we, kind of strengthen the dialogue about things like FERPA. FERPA used to be a all or nothing approach in the way we dialogued about this with families. We wanted to help educate families about FERPA and how you can start to educate yourself about your students' experience. Campus ESP gave us the runway to do all of that. And so I think that is precisely what drove us to our partnership with Campus ESP, but really beyond Campus ESP, our overall approach to family engagement.
That's helpful. Awesome. Great. Yeah, and I remember when we were first talking, Facebook, moving away from Facebook to something that's going to be more tied to student success was a really big focus. So we kind of chunked this research into 5 components. The first one is parent engagement increases student retention. This would have been a very controversial topic, I feel like 6 years ago. Now I don't feel like it's very controversial. People kind of get it, which is if you engage families, you can increase student retention. And the big research that we have this year is modeled off of research we do every year, and the results are pretty similar, which is we typically see, on average, student retention about 8% higher for students that have a parent in Campus ESP receiving data alerts. And this year we expanded the study. We had 9 schools and who had about 12,000 students in this study. And on the first row, which you can see over here, you can see the institutional retention rate for each of these schools. On the second row, you can see the retention rate with parent engagement. This is specifically coming from Campus ESP, and we'll talk about this in a moment. And then you can see the overall retention gains. And so much of this is very much focused on like what are your normal retention rates to begin with, and how much you can grow from there. But we always try to pick a wide selection of different types of schools, because we always see the same thing, which is students that have a parent receiving alerts in Campus ESP have higher retention rates. So let me kind of throw it over to Jen and Sabir. I know when you saw this, like, what were some of your reactions? Actually, Duquesne and Drexel, these 2 columns over here, it's some of the more modest results. But when you look at this overall, are you surprised when you see this?
Jen, I'm happy to jump in if you'd like.
Sure, go ahead.
So, Dave, quick answer to your question, no, not surprised at all. And I think it's about opening the door so that you can have a partnership-based approach with families to their student success. And if you can make it easier for families to access information so that they're educated about their students' experience, it goes without saying that student is much more likely to find success on campus. For us at Drexel, this slide, I don't even think tells the full story of the impact. So that 89.5% institutional retention rate is where we're at now. Dating back years, we were more in the low to mid 80% range. We created an enrollment management student success organization, which I sit as a part of. And we really tried to create a culture of student success, which family engagement was central to. And so, this work with in partnership with CampusESP was about what we were trying to build culturally here at the institution, which again was about really centering everything we do around the student experience. And a critical portion of the student experience is their involvement of their family members. And it was one of the missing pieces that we really needed to lean into. So this slide, and even more than that, tells the story of why I think these numbers are what they are.
Yeah,
Jen.
we're going to go a level deeper too in a moment here to talk about some of the trends we're seeing. Jen, I'm assuming similar feel from you as well?
Yeah, it's so great to see the concrete data though. But I'm not surprised as well. With my position came the parent portal. So Duquesne didn't even have a parent engagement office. And I think it was my third day that we launched the parent portal. So it was definitely like feet first, but we have a lot more resources that are working at student retention and working to educate parents and working to partner with them and use their influence with their student to improve their engagement and retention.
That's great. There's actually a timely question right now, which is, can you speak more specifically about what type of student data is being shared with parents? And Subir, I think for you guys, it's pretty much everything that you would kind of see in the self-service view of, I think you use Banner, right? You're seeing grades, you're seeing potentially some billing information, financial aid, holds, credit, schedule, right?
Yeah, I mean, at the broadest level, we're opening the door so that family members can see pretty much every part of a student's experience. Now, again, that is driven by FERPA authorization for what a student feels comfortable sharing with their family members. But if the student is on board, we kind of open the door for pretty much every part of the student experience through the portal.
And we're going to get to this slide in a moment, but there's only certain when we've gone deeper on this, there's certain data that when it's shared from the student record to the parents helps from a retention perspective and is more highly correlated with these retention results. It's not grades, it's not billing, although those might be useful to share with the parents. It really is financial aid, holds, and student status changes, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So let's just go to the next slide here. Kind of next takeaway we saw from this research is that student retention gains are highest for Black and Hispanic families. Again, we see this pretty much every year. So in this study, we dove deeper with Duquesne and Auburn University. And you can see, again, the institutional retention rate for Duquesne by race ethnicity, and you can see the retention rate with parent engagement and the gains that you see there. I think everybody kind of just instinctively thinks, okay, well, maybe there's more retention to gain with those students. But this is what I kind of jumped out at me a little bit, Jen, and maybe you can answer this, which is you can see that Hispanic students actually had the highest retention rate to begin with, and then had even the biggest gains. So what's going on there when you see Latinx, Hispanic students, and is there some sort of magic that Duquesne is doing or that you see from a family perspective that really influences these pretty spectacular results?
Yeah, so I just think, making an effort to reach those families. We have events such as Black History Month and Latinx and Hispanic Heritage Month. So making sure that we're tagging these communities of self-identified folks that have, identified on their onboarding survey. So just kind of making sure to reach them and let them know, here's some additional information that could help you along the way. and here are like some cool things that, you know, Duquesne is celebrating with you.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I know when we first started doing research at Campus ESP, when we first started Campus ESP, before there was a platform, we saw higher levels of engagement for Black families, for Hispanic families. So to see these results and to see their involvement have an influence on student success, for me, it's not surprising. Subir, not to leave you out here, these are the results from last year's study where we profiled Drexel and Texas State. Texas State's results are consistently among some of the most amazing I've ever seen. We always like highlighting those, but a similar pattern that you saw last year as well when it comes to retention rates, gains that you saw for Hispanic and Black families. Given that Drexel is in an urban environment and you're supporting a lot of these families, any other like urban context that we should be thinking about when we're looking at this kind of this data?
Yeah, David, it's a great question, and you know, for the benefit of those who are joining us today, my doctorate's actually in urban education, and so I can speak with some knowledge of this topic. You know, at the K through 12 level, one of the primary or top predictors of student success is parent involvement. And so when you're pulling from that population, which for an institution like Drexel, which has a high number of students who come from the local area, who come from an urban environment, it's critical to rely on those factors that show what led to the success that allowed those students to enter in to our institution, or really any institution of higher education. You know, at the end of the day, there's a lot of theories out there that talk about if you can make a connectivity between your life outside of school and what's happening in school, if there's a closer alignment between those two areas, you're more likely to find success. You're more likely to find success in the classroom and ultimately land walking across that stage, you know, for graduation. And that's really what this is about. The reality for families is not everyone is starting off from the same starting point. Part of this work is to create a strong foundation for all of our students. And I think that's part of what you're seeing in this data point is that, you know, what are mechanisms through which we can deliver solid information so that, again, family members who are engaged with their students are operating with a good kind of good information so that the dialogue can happen in an authentic and real way.
There's another question out there, which is, how do you determine the bottom value, the retention rate with parent engagement? And I don't know if you can. I mean, I always say that this is highly correlative data. I never say there's causality here because it's very difficult to get to, but we do have another research study where we had a data scientist from a small private institution in Texas go in here, and they came back with 10% higher for their families. It was the impact of parent engagement was as a predictor of student retention was as big as expected family contribution. In other words, families with a lot of resources will have students that are generally more successful. Parent engagement was on the same level as that. And if you go to our blog and research site, you can actually download that study. But it's tough because you've got so many dials and levers that are at your disposal for retention, and picking out just one, I think is, I don't know. This is the vendor saying that too. So I always try to hedge on that. One of the things that we did see too in this data is that student retention gains are higher for first generation and Pell eligible students. We've never looked at this before. So this is super exciting for us, which is, again, we drilled into some of the data that Duquesne and Auburn shared with us. And you can see the overall retention gains for all students. You can see for first generation, the gains were higher in the case of Duquesne, and also for Pell eligible students. And what really jumped out at me, maybe this is a question for Jen here, is like, you can see the retention rate with parent engagement is kind of pretty similar across the board. So it looks like to me, it's leveling the playing field, right? So when you see this kind of data, Jen, and you know maybe the students that are Pell eligible, their families might need more resources, how do you how do you aid with the transition?
Yeah, so something in Campus ESP that has been, I think, really helpful is the ability for parents and other users to ask questions. We're able to answer those questions, and then other users are able to go into a post and be like, oh, I had that question too, and there's an answer. Sharing of information, I think, is very helpful. Something I wanted to touch on that we do at Duquesne, we have an orientation hub. So this is a hub for parents that are automatically transferred from the perspective side of the portal to the current side. And they're put in there based on their students' first year status. And the students get from our orientation team a packet of information. So in this orientation hub, we have kind of that packet of information and in a digital realm. And there's stuff like share with your student types of posts, move-in day information, tips, information on parent orientation, packing lists. So it's kind of helping the parents with the transition, and for both our Pell eligible and our first generation families. I feel like that's super helpful.
Yeah, I feel like in some cases they don't know what they don't know, right? And they're looking for those resources that maybe we think are basic, but they are clicking on. They need that information. Subir, Drexel, large Pell eligible population. I think you said it's like 30%.
Yeah.
Any context from your perspective here?
I think Jen said it well, and I think David's to the point that you just raised. And it kind of goes back to the points I was making in the earlier slides. I think there are things that we often take for granted that are not true for all families. And so anything that we can do to provide that infrastructure to where families are operating with good information. And again, it's all about the student, like the information we provide through the portal is information about us as an institution, but it paints a picture for that family member to understand what is my student going through on a day-to-day basis in and out of the classroom. That is incredibly helpful. It allows the student to call home and say, I just experienced X, and the parent not to start from a place where they're saying, tell me more because I don't understand. Maybe that tell me more is still there, but maybe they're a little bit further educated in terms of what that is, so they can offer the support to their student. So again, they can find success, or they can find the resources that they need on campus when they inevitably will run into those challenges. So
that really resonates with me because I know when I started Campus ESP, one of the things we did is we surveyed students, and I was like, do you want your parents to be involved? Do you want them receiving communication? And I was very surprised. We were in rural schools in Texas, people that I wouldn't have thought would want their parents to be involved, but they wanted their parents to be involved and informed so that when they had conversations, which were occurring pretty regularly with the parents, that they didn't have to explain everything to the parents. So they almost wanted like the parents to know what was going on, and so that they could progress the conversation to the next level, which I thought was pretty interesting. And keying off of that whole student aspect, which I always say at Campus ESP, like parent engagement for parent engagement's sake isn't really what we're about. It's really about parent engagement for the student success piece of it. So this is a takeaway from our top trends webinar, which we just did a couple weeks ago, top trends for 2024. I think it's definitely worth checking out if you have time. And there's a blog post too. If you just want to get to the point, you can just read the blog post. But students are stressed. Parents want to help. Students want that too. This is some data from a couple years ago from our partners at ZME. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of talk about these. 89% of high school or 12th grade students feel stressed very often. 79% feel anxious very often. 74% feel worried very often. So I know this is palpable on campus, right? The reason why I'm bringing up high school students here is because you are getting them at your college or university. And I feel like a lot of this started, or at least being measured at these high levels after COVID. Question for both of you, let's start with Subir. Like, do you think this trend will continue? Do you think mental health and the focus that you need to put on it as a leader at a university is going to continue?
Yeah, Dave, from where I sit, the answer is a 100% yes. And when I introduced myself, I talked about that I've been in this field for approximately 20 years, 18 years here at Drexel. This topic, mental health, anxiety, stress, it's the number one thing that I've seen over my 20 years just continue on an upward trajectory. And I think without question, the pandemic brought a spotlight to a lot of these issues. But from where I sit, all it did was accelerate things that were already happening within this. Students are coming to us, and as you mentioned, Dave, this happens before they get to college, but just looking at higher education, they are entering into our doors with more complex and complicated issues than ever before. And the reality is that the infrastructure that most, if not all, institutions of higher education set up are not set up to meet those very complex challenges that students are bringing in the door. So you have to be creative and bring in more partners and establish more partnerships so that you can take a holistic approach to helping these students with these very complex issues. And when you're thinking about partners, family members are often at the top of the list. They have been with their student through their lives on this journey. Who else is better set up to help you formulate these plans and these support networks for students than those family members? And so I think this is a critical issue that, from where I sit, will only continue to be more critical as we move along in these next few years.
Right. These trends aren't going away. You don't see these trends going away. I mean, and when you think about partners, parents make perfect sense. They definitely want their students to be safe, healthy, successful. So, why not involve them? Jen, from a Duquesne perspective, is there specific resources that you share? Like, I could see some schools, as they're rolling out a parent engagement strategy, trying to do as much as they can, but feeling like there's only so much they can do. So, like, how do you support mental health and get parents the information they need to support their students?
Yeah, so first I wanted to agree with everything Subir said.
That's what I always
at
do. Always the right thing.
At Duquesne, we're also seeing an increase in students who need help maintaining their health and their well-being. Duquesne has offices such as Disability Services, the Power Center. So it's a multi-floor gym that's got treadmills and a weightlifting floor, spin studios, something for every level. And then we have a counseling and well-being center. And now I want to turn it more to the parent portal. A lot of the posts that CampusESP creates, we label them as help your student types of posts. And they're helpful to parents because it's giving them resources, giving them checklists of things to, talk to their student about, things that they can do to help their student grow. So I think that's helpful as well.
As a parent who's going on a lot of college tours right now, I have 12th grade twins. The parents are the ones who ask all the questions, right? But they're not, you never get on a tour and there's never a parent, usually not a parent that says, explain to me all the counseling resources, like this. So some of this is very personal, right? So getting the information to parents in the right format, oftentimes, whether it's a newsletter or something direct to the parent, or if it's the portal, fine. But sending it in a personal way is important. And this is another data point from our partners at RNL that I like pointing out, that 4 out of 10 families communicate with their college students daily. So when you get these students, whether or not they have needs that maybe like you have to plan for or not, they are engaging with their families at a very high rate. So if you can get the information to their families, they're going to be able to better support their students. And then tying it back to all the information that parents want, and this is where we'll kind of get into everybody's favorite FERPA, I'll just say FERPA right there, is higher ed professionals are being asked to do more with less, and it's getting ridiculous. This is another one of our top trend themes from 2024 that we just went through a couple weeks ago. I think this whole parents expect more is pretty interesting for a lot of folks. That 40% of families want to be more involved in their students' experience at the institute. They're already pretty involved, I would say. 48% of families attended family weekend last year. 94% of families have visited campus since their student enrolled. And we have this data from many years ago, which kind of gave birth to CampusESP, that 61% of parents have their students' college IDs and passwords. So if you're not creating a way for families to engage productively, they kind of create their own path, which again ties back to all the different types of data that we at CampusESP have been helping schools send from their students to their parents. And here you have a list that we went through this year that shows you the average clicks per school on the different pieces of FERPA protected data. So everything from admitted next steps, which is actually protected in Texas. This is from some of our Texas schools, to account balance, to GPA, all the way down to financial aid documents needed. This gives you an idea of what parents are clicking on the most. Not always because they want that data, but because it might be getting updated in your SIS most frequently. And so when it gets updated in your SIS, sends an alert to the parents, they're clicking through on it. One thing I want to drill into here is that these are the areas where we see an impact on retention. So I mentioned earlier, GPA. I'm sure a lot of parents would like to see GPA. Not all students want to share it. By the way, the rejection rate for GPA in CampusESP is somewhere around 8%. So most students are sharing it. But credit hours, accepted aid requirements, hold, status, these are the things that if a student isn't making sure they're up to date with all their financial aid requirements, or drop it below a certain level on credits, or have holds that prevent them from doing something next, that if you can get that information to the parents and how to best support their students, these stars are where we see the most correlation with student retention. So this is often a controversial slide. Generally, when we're showing it to registrars, since I already talked earlier today about the fact that only 1% of the registrants are registrars on this webinar, I feel like we're in a safe space. So let's talk a little bit about FERPA. Expectations are changing. And I guess like what I always come back to is, how much is too much for the families? I feel like that is a very important narrative, and I know it's changed over the years, but Jen, let's start with you. Like, how much is too much when you're sharing information with families?
Yeah, I feel like there's no such thing as too much. Even if it's not applicable information for one family at one time, at least it's on the portal. Like if a family has a question about financial aid and they're like, oh, that doesn't apply to us this year, maybe next year, you're going to be looking for that information and be able to click on the community and click on the financial aid and be like, oh my gosh, this article is so helpful. I would rather have too much information than not enough, because to help our parents help their students and help their student success, to add to student success, I think just having it out there that they can decide if they want to look at it or not is helpful.
Thanks, that's super helpful. Subir, similar, what's your take on it, on how much is too much?
Yeah, Dave, I think Jen hit the nail on the head. Going back to that slide you showed a couple slides ago, parents and family members are already involved. Like whether we create the infrastructure, whether we have the portal, they're already getting engaged. And so a big part of what I believe our work should be is meeting them where they are. If they're already there, then why not try to help with that communication so that everybody's operating with the right set of factors and information. So again, we can make the best decisions as it relates to the student. Now, in the context of kind of what we should or shouldn't share, there's always going to be limits. For example, part of the area that I work with at Drexel is our student counseling center. We're not going to share student information in terms of, therapy sessions that they have with their counselor. That is confidential and protected information. So there's always limits. We're not going to open the book completely to share every detail about a student's experience here. But I think within reason, particularly for all these things that are listed here, again, parents already have that information. So why not try to help with the dialogue that ultimately is going to lead to greater success for that student? And so I think we got to meet families where they are, because I think that's beneficial for everybody.
That's well put. I'm going to encourage anybody who has questions for myself, for Jen, Subir, to put them into the chat as we kind of come to the end of this presentation. I wanted to tell one quick story, which is I feel like it's one of my go-to stories. It's before we ever deployed or built anything with CampusESP. I was talking with a head of counseling at another Philadelphia college in the area. Again, this is before we built anything at CampusESP, and I was just getting their perspectives on parent engagement. And they thought parents should not be engaged. This is probably 8 or 9 years ago. They hated the whole idea of it. They thought it hurt critical thinking, independence, all those things that, of course, we want to help grow with students. And it was really a horrible conversation. I just wanted to end on a high note. So what you do when you try to end on a high note is you ask somebody about their kids. And so I asked this person about their kids, and she said, I was like, are your kids in college? And she said, I have 2 daughters in college. I'm like, oh, congratulations. And we started talking about that. I was like, how are they doing? And she's like, they're doing very well, but only because I check their grades every single week. And I always think that hypocrisy is somewhat out there, which is like everybody wants the students to be independent. Everybody wants the parents to be able to step away. But at the end of the day, it's such an important decision and such a huge investment that families are making, and they want their students to be successful. So it's when it comes to their kids, sometimes things are very different than what they'd like to see in the world out there. So the whole FERPA management system, I will say, was designed by registrars, created for parents, and kind of connects FERPA to student success. This is, I probably should have put this up front now that I think about it, but this gives parents a view not only into parent communication, but into their students' information, and then allows parents to drill more into that. It's something that I think is a real student success tool. If you want to learn more, we have our Campus ESP Learning Series. You can go to our website, just click on the Learning Series link there. And we actually go through Campus ESP training, but there's also a lot of stuff that you can use outside of Campus ESP. We also have our summit, which is in Philadelphia this year, where it's always sunny in Philadelphia. This is our 6th annual summit. We have best practices from other schools. Subir, you and I did a session a couple years ago in Baltimore, which we still, I think there's a picture or 2 on the website of that. And then if you're interested in seeing a demo, we have that as well. We'll see if there's any questions. I don't see any questions out there. So we'll just maybe wrap it up with final thoughts. Jen, do you want to kind of wrap us up here, and then we'll go to Subir?
Sure. So Duquesne definitely needed a way to, communicate with parents. The parent portal was definitely that answer. We see the parent influence time and time again, coming into play in a student's experience. And to improve the student experience, we have to improve communications. And the parent portal helps us with that every step of the way.
Oh, it's that simple, and you guys have been a great partner. So thank you for your partnership.
Thank you.
Sabir, anything would you like to wrap up with here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll start here, and I really genuinely mean this, and it's not because I'm here today or because we're speaking with Dave. Our partnership with Campus ESP is one of the things I'm most proud of that we've implemented since I've had the opportunity to serve as a senior leader here at Drexel. And I believe in the partnership. I believe in Campus ESP, but beyond that, I also believe in the culture of what we're trying to create, what we've spent the last 40 to 45 minutes in terms of talking about. I was one of those administrators, Dave, that you referenced in the story that you shared, that thought we got to cut the cord with parents, and it's about students kind of getting off on their own. And those many moons ago when I was in college, the last thing I would want is for somebody to engage with my parents. But times change, and higher education has changed, and I think student desire for what they're looking for in their experience has also changed. And I think it's incumbent upon us as senior administrators to evolve with those times. And again, all of this is about student success, and family members are a critical part of that journey. And so, I believe in the conversation that we're having, and I'm thrilled that I can be a part of that. And Dave, thanks to you and your team for allowing us, Jen and I, to be so.
Well, I always love talking with both of you. I consider both of you guys leaders in this area. So Jen, thank you so much. Shabir, thank you so much. It's great getting your perspective on the research, and I feel like you guys both push Campus ESP too to be better and better. So thank you for believing. I think that's the word that most resonated with me, Shabir, when you were just talking there, which is I believe in Campus ESP. I definitely believe in parents influencing student success. So thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon as well. Hopefully, if you're in a snow locked area, you are safe right now. And we'll be sending out the deck. We'll be sending out, if there's any questions that we missed along the way, we'll send out some answers directly to you as well. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to either Jen, Sabir, or myself here. You have our personal emails, or our professional emails rather. And thank you again for your time today. So I hope you have a great, what's today? Is today Tuesday? I hope you have a great Tuesday and rest of your week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.